For the city is lost forever! Seal your hearts, for the Death Guard fear no fear, but neither do the sons of Gideon. Remember, brothers, armor may corrode, but duty endures. We are death and decay. Hold the line, brothers! Courage and honor!
Courage and honor. I hear you murmur these words in the mist. There is no courage to be found here, my nephews. No honor to be had. Your souls will join the trillion others, shrieking uselessly into eternity.
The Death Guard, once the proud 14th Legion. Known as the Dusk Raiders before their Primarch Mortarion was found, they won renown for surviving conditions and weapons that would annihilate other armies. Shell-churned trenches, rad-blasted wastes, and choking chem clouds scarcely slowed their advance.
Pestilence and plague.
They trusted in their own grim fortitude above all else. Yet that very faith in imperviousness proved their undoing, for it left them wide open to the corrupting gifts of Nurgle that would condemn the Legion to chaos. In this episode, we will go through a lore exploration of the 14th Legion, how they fight, how they became the monsters they currently are. We will discover their most iconic characters and many details that make this one of the most interesting legions of the lot. Stick with us through this episode as we descend into the fetid corridors of the 14th Legion's history.
Headless, the winds of death call us elsewhere. Breathe deep, fools.
The Death Guard legionaries, now Plague Marines in truth, their bodies and armor so thoroughly interwoven that rusted ceramite pulses with their own corrupted heartbeats.
Enemies are plenty. Command us. We cannot be denied.
Where once helm displays flashed neat fire solutions, fused visor plates now show a living palimpsest of real space. Many of them are so corrupted that they see machine ghost code and bubbling nightmares. Each image overrun by crawling runes of contagion. Blightlord Terminators shuffle beside them like ambulatory mountains of rot. Swollen plate armor incubating entire ecosystems of mold and spores. Each step cracks open vents that belch carrion incense, strong enough to blacken even Promethean flames. Fetid bloat drones hum overhead, gravid hulks, whose flesh-pitted chassis seethe with maggots that guide them by taste alone toward the clean and the living. Beneath these war machines lurch the poxwalkers, once regular men and women, now giggling carriers of plague who claw at the sterile and the afraid, eager to share their blissful decay.
Squadronic, sweet lips! Purge those poxwalkers with cleansing flame!
Nothing remains the same for long. There is always the slow creep of change. That is the theme that sets our kind apart from the old Imperium. The false god desire, above all things, stasis. They preserve, they record, they clamp down hard on the passage of time. They are caught in their single moment, one that should have been confined to history 10 millennia ago. A moment that freezes their muscles and keeps their mouths and minds shut. It will be a mercy to end that empire, for there is no greater agony than rictus.
Originally known as the Dusk Raiders, these warriors were raised from the poisonous, mist-shrouded world of Barbarous. Mortarion's legion was defined early on by resilience and stubborn endurance. They believed hardship should be faced with faith in inner strength, strong will, and stern resolution, opposing all forms of oppression. After Mortarion was reunited with his legion during the Great Crusade, he instilled his own grim ethos. At their initial encounter, he proclaimed, "You are my unbroken blades, my death guard." And from that moment on, the Legion bore its new title. A name that gained renown for surviving conditions and circumstances that would destroy other armies. During the turmoil of the Horus heresy, this proud ethos was corrupted. Mortarion and most of the 14th turned against the Emperor, joining the War Master Horus's rebellion against their father. It should be noted that not all of Mortarion's Gene-sons fell to chaos. A handful of loyalist Death Guard from that time, like Battle Captain Nathaniel Garrow, went on to be part of the Grey Knights and other secret Imperial orders. However, these individuals are no longer considered part of the Death Guard Legion proper, and thus are only relevant as historical footnotes. The Legion we speak of now consists solely of traitors bound to Nurgle. The Legion's turning point, later known as the fall of the Death Guard, came during their ill-fated warp voyage to Terra. First Captain Callus Typhon, who would later become known as Typhus, betrayed Mortarion's fleet by murdering the navigators and stranding the Death Guard in the Immaterium. Adrift in the warp, the Legion was ravaged by an unstoppable contagion, later known as the Destroyer Plague. Suffering unimaginable agony as their bodies bloated and rotted from within. The proud unbroken, those who had endured the most heinous infections and maladies the galaxy had thrown at them so far. Those who prided themselves in being unbreakable. They were finally brought to their knees. At the height of this torment, Nurgle, the chaos god of plague and decay, offered salvation. Mortarion, faced with eternal and unimaginable suffering, finally yielded and pledged the Death Guard to Nurgle, ending their pain at the price of their souls. The Destroyer Plague was lifted, but the Legion was already ravaged, and it was reborn as Plague Marines. Bloated, disease-ridden parodies of their former selves. Mortarion himself was elevated as a demon prince of Nurgle, cursed with immortality and power in equal measure. Thus damned, the Death Guard arrived at Terra, not as liberators of humanity, but as harbingers of decay. They fought in the siege of the Imperial Palace as Horus's shock troops, Mortarion personally leading his postulant sons into battle. In the heresy's aftermath, Barbarous was scoured of life by loyalist forces, and the traitor 14th Legion retreated into the Eye of Terror. There, on a demon world aptly named the Plague Planet, Mortarion broods and rules over his plague-ridden domain. What was once the Dusk Raiders, champions of human endurance, had fully transformed into the Death Guard, Nurgle's chosen instruments of rot and ruin.
No fire will cure it! The dark powers come! Forget no insult, my sons, as I have never forgotten those of my father, of the Emperor, nor those of Horus. Forgive no slight or grievance. Hold your bitterness deep within, and there let it fester. Let it roil and squirm and churn, until you are filled with bile so poisonous that all you touch falls to ruin. Thus shall you serve Nurgle best. Thus shall you spread his virulent gifts across the false Imperium, and watch its final rotting.
People of Tarsum, hear me. We are the Mobian Six, returned and redeemed. Their chains no longer bind us. Their bastions can no longer hold us. Once we were lost, like you, blinded by faith and acceptance. Only when our eyes were opened did we truly see the lies for what they were. We are your sons. We are your daughters. We have come home. It is our solemn pledge to bring about a new and glorious age of freedom and prosperity. Join us and cast off the forces of the earth.
Attend, my putrefying pupils. I know the creed that guides every rasping breath of the Death Guard. We were once mere seekers of endurance, but Grandfather Nurgle revealed the deeper truth. Freedom lies not in resisting decay, but in surrendering to it. Thus do we bear his gifts with pride, spreading them to those who still cling to the delusion of unspoilt flesh. See how my brothers nurture rust upon their plate and nurse virulent spores beneath the seams. Each ulcer a badge, each maggot a prayer. Before battle, we steep bolter shells in fetid broths, chant the sepulchral litanies, and smear blade edges with phlegm brewed in cauldrons that bubble like diseased hearts. Every clash is a sacrament. Enemies fall, soil blackens, and a fresh played garden blooms in our wake. From these gardens we harvest new contagions, refining them in alembics so that the weak may learn humility. Remember always the sacred 7. 7 invocations, 7 offerings, 7 ranks within the warband. For in that number, Grandfather's laughter echoes loudest. Embrace the rot, and you too will taste the bliss of corruption everlasting.
Unusually among the traitor legions, the Death Guard have retained a coherent legion structure under Mortarion's rule. In the 41st millennium, the Legion's core is divided into 7 plague companies, each a colossal force in its own right. Every plague company has its own sickening heraldry, favored plague strains, and demonic support, and is commanded by a senior lord of the Death Guard, sometimes bearing titles like Lord of Contagion or Lord of Virulence. On the Plague Planet, each of the 7 companies maintains a fortress cathedral in the diseased swamps, and Mortarion's influence is ever present in their doctrine. The company names and roles reflect their customs. The first Plague Company, the Harbingers. Led by Typhus the Traveler, first captain and herald of Nurgle, famed for unleashing hordes of the walking dead. Its ranks are infested with countless strains of the zombie plague spread by Typhus's own destroyer hive. This company commands the primary plague fleet, including the ancient warship Terminus Est, that roams the stars to spread new infections. The second Plague Company, the Inexorable. Specialists in siege warfare and armored assaults, the Inexorable field vast formations of demon-forged tanks and war machines. Their warriors and vehicles all bear the Ferric Blight, a crawling metallic rust that corrodes enemy fortifications and armor upon contact. The third Plague Company, Mortarion's Anvil. The most defensive and unyielding of the companies, they excel at grinding attritional battles, fortifying positions and letting the foe break against them. Warriors of the Anvil carry a plague called the Gloaming Bloat, a fever that causes victims to sweat profusely and weakens their voices to wet gurgles, symbolizing the silent inevitability of death. The fourth Plague Company, the Wretched, a company steeped in sorcery and demonic patronage. Unusually, it is ruled by a demon, the entity known as the Eater of Lives, summoned to lead them. The Wretched prefer to field corrupted psychers and summon Nurgle's demons to battle. They are riddled with the Eater Plague, a curse that racks them with constant, violent mutation. The fifth Plague Company, the Poxmongers. Masters of demon engines and infernal machinery, the Poxmongers maintain and unleash many of the Legion's plague tanks, contagion engines, and drone swarms. They are afflicted with the sanguis flux, a disease causing ceaseless bleeding from every orifice. Yet this endless flow of blood and filth only empowers their biomechanical creations. The sixth Plague Company, the Ferrymen. This company acts as ferrymen and fleet masters, securing void ships to carry the Legion's plagues across the stars. They boast large numbers of Terminator armored elites to enforce Mortarion's will aboard captured vessels. The ferrymen carry a parasite known as the droning, a constant droning buzz in the ears of any who approach, said to herald the victim's slow death. A subcult known as the Venom Mariners operates within the ferrymen, specializing in toxic warfare. The seventh Plague Company, Mortarion's Chosen Sons. The Chosen Sons or the plague brewers and alchemical savants of the Death Guard. Many among them were once the Legion's apothecaries and scientists, now turned to brewing ever more virulent contagions. They are blessed with the crawling pestilence, a disease that manifests as throngs of tiny poisonous insects living inside their flesh. This company guards Mortarion's personal laboratories and cauldrons on the plague planet, perfecting new toxins to unleash upon the galaxy. Despite this formal structure, the Death Guard do not always operate as one massed legion. Mortarion's traditionalism keeps the framework intact, but in practice the Legion is fractured into many autonomous forces called Vectoriums. Each Vectorium is a warband of Death Guard, from a few squads to entire companies, given a mission or following a demon-inspired vision. These Vectoriums range across countless war zones, spreading Nurgle's plagues on their own initiative, or at the behest of their Primarch. The Death Guard claimed to fight for a singular purpose under Mortarion's will, and indeed they remain far more unified than many traitor legions. Still, Grandfather Nurgle encourages fecund diversity, so each warband often pursues its own method of spreading corruption. The ties of loyalty between these groups are tenuous. For example, Necrosius, a renegade plague sorcerer and former Death Guard apothecary, broke away to form the Apostles of Contagion warband, rejecting Mortarion's direct rule. Necrosius's apostles were responsible for the dreaded zombie plague outbreaks during the siege of Rax, using warp-diseased gas to turn fallen soldiers into plague zombies. In general, however, open conflict between Death Guard factions is rare. They are united in reverence of Nurgle, and a shared goal of tearing down the living Imperium. All their customs, from battle cant to company organization, serve one overarching tradition: to spread entropy and despair until nothing uncorrupted remains. The Death Guard wage war as an implacable, methodical force of attrition. Even before their fall, they specialized in heavy infantry assaults, massed bombardments, and chemical warfare. In the 41st millennium, these traits are taken to the extreme. Death Guard forces advance at a steady, relentless pace, foot-slogging through the worst enemy fire, shrugging off wounds that would kill lesser Astartes.
Such delightful horrors I have wrought, such bounteous rot and disease have I bestowed in the Grandfather's name. Yet always there must be more, for with every world I ruin, so Nurgle rewards me further, and so my might grows ever greater.
They favor no-nonsense weaponry, like bolt guns, plague-infused knives, massive flails and grimy flamers, eschewing finesse for brutal effectiveness. Their resilience is their hallmark, bolstered further by Nurgle's dark blessings of unnatural durability.
Like death, victory is inevitable.
Death Guard siege breakers will stand in the open, breathing poisonous air that sends foes scrambling for rebreathers.
We gift this place to Nurgle! Touch this shrine, Plague Lord!
They consider battlefield toxins and diseases as tactical assets, shaping the combat zone itself into a deadly hazard for the enemy. In many war zones, the Death Guard deliberately create plague zones, regions saturated with lethal contagion through the use of alchemical weapons and demonic rites. Death Guard warfare typically opens with long-range bombardment to weaken the foe. They employ corrupted artillery shells and warheads that disperse spore clouds, corrosive slime, and virus bombs on impact. Enemy defenders are thus diseased, disoriented, and demoralized, even before the main attack. Under this cover of filth, waves of resilient Plague Marines march forward in lockstep, often accompanied by giggling swarms of Nurglings underfoot and summoned plague-bearer demons shuffling alongside them. By the time the Death Guard reach striking distance, the foe's guns are often silenced by decay, literally clogged with rust, or their crews bloated with infection. It is then that the legionaries of Nurgle wade in to finish the job with bolter, blade, and plague. This methodical approach exemplifies Mortarion's core teaching. Victory comes through endurance and inevitability, not speed or flamboyance. The Death Guard will gladly trade losses and take their time if it ensures the enemy's ultimate corrosion and collapse. Where a fresh Loyalist chapter might seek a decisive strike, the Death Guard prefer to grind their foe down over weeks or months of ever-worsening conditions. They turn war zones into quarantined hellscapes, then shamble onward once nothing living remains. Imperial tacticians grimly nickname this approach the Creeping Death, a slow, inexorable doom that advances under a cloak of rot.
Defeat was inevitable. We prepared to sell our lives for the Imperium. But as despair festered, a stranger walked among us.
Heretics! By the throne, you will all pay for this!
We were taught what it meant to be strong, to be blessed. And thus we became the true defenders of humanity. How will your false emperor protect you now?
To execute their plague-ridden style of warfare, the Death Guard wield a variety of foul units unique to their legion. Plague Marines, the standard foot soldiers of the Death Guard. Plague Marines are Chaos Space Marines bloated with supernatural disease. They shamble forward in cataphractic armor, corroded emerald, and rust, feeling neither pain nor fear. Each Plague Marine's power armor literally festers with infestations. Insects skitter in the eye lenses, and slime seeps from the joints. They commonly wield bolt guns loaded with toxin-tipped rounds or spray corrosive plague spewers at close range. Plague Marines can absorb wounds that would take a normal Astartes out of action. They ignore injuries as Nurgle knits their rotten flesh or numbs their nerves. In battle, they advance relentlessly, chanting liturgies to Nurgle, and establish blight zones with their so-called blight grenades, which are improvised explosives filled with noxious filth. The blight grenade is practically a Death Guard art form, with warbands like the Pax Mortis prizing those who brew the most virulent strains. Plague Marine squads often carry specialist champions, such as the Plague Surgeon, who harvests genetic material amid the carnage to brew new plagues, or the Icon Bearers, who hold up banners dripping with disease that invigorates their kin. Poxwalkers. These horrors are mindless plague zombies that the Death Guard use as expendable frontline fodder and shock troops. A Poxwalker is created from infected human populations, victims of Nurgle's rot, or similar maladies who have undergone a hideous transformation. Shambling across the battlefield in reeking hordes, Poxwalkers overwhelm the enemy in a tide of rotting bodies. They feel no pain and cannot be reasoned with. Even destroyed limbs won't stop them, as they crawl and bite with whatever remains. According to inquisitorial studies, Poxwalkers remain consciously aware of their condition, a truly damnable fate, as the victim's soul is trapped in an undead shell, unable to control their plague-ravaged body. Demon engines. The Death Guard fields a macabre armory of demon-infused war machines that augment their slow infantry. Chief among these are the Plague Burst Crawlers. Each of these is squat and heavily armored, with a frontal dozer blade and hull so thick that it can weather the fiercest return fire. In close quarters, Plague Burst Crawlers also sport sponson weapons that spew disease or shrapnel. The mere sight of these siege engines belching plague smoke has caused panicked routs among Imperial Guard lines. Fetid bloat drones. These are eerie flying demon machines that hover above Death Guard hosts like bloated giant insects. A fetid bloat drone is essentially a demonic rotorcraft, a brass and fleshy orb wreathed in buzzing blades, driven by the bound essence of a spiteful Nurgle demon. Bloat drones provide close air support and sow terror among the enemy ranks. They are outfitted with various weaponry. Some carry twin plague spitters, vomiting streams of infectious bile over infantry. Others are armed with heavy blight launchers that fire explosive spore missiles from afar. A particularly gruesome variant carries a whirling flesh mower blade on its front. Essentially, a rotating set of scythe blades that can mow down squads of foes like a horrible harvester. Terminators. For shock assaults, the Death Guard still maintain contingents of Terminator armored veterans, notably the Death Shroud and Blightlord Terminators. The Death Shroud were once Mortarion's personal bodyguard. Now, as demon-enslaved hulks, they wield enormous Man-Reaper scythes and alchem munitions to reap victims in close combat.
Even whilst we fight, we watch. Even whilst we kill, we judge. Amidst war's full fury still we see. Amidst all your gods still we strike. We are the Death Lord's icy gaze, and we are his reaping blade.
Blightlord Terminators are used as heavy assault infantry, teleporting into enemy strongholds amidst clouds of fetid vapors, encased in rot-marked cataphracti armor, and armed with plague-ridden combi bolters and blades. These Terminators act as inexorable bulwarks, holding key positions or spearheading breaches. Their tactical role is akin to an anvil, unbreakable, around which the rest of the plague host can maneuver. Many also carry specialized war gear, like plague burst grenades or injector glaives that deliver concentrated toxins into enemy walkers and monsters. What they lack in speed, they make up for in being nearly impossible to dislodge. Even gravely wounded, Blightlords will fight on. Bodies sustained by parasitic plagues that puppeteer their flesh. In summary, the Death Guard arsenal is not geared for elegance or rapid thrusts. It is built for attrition, area denial, and maximum corruption. Whether by infectious infantry, demon engines, or contagion cults, their victories come when the enemy can no longer stand to fight, literally rotted from within. Imperial tactical notes describe Death Guard battle zones as literal hell. The very air unbreathable, the earth turned to sludge, and the veil between reality and the warp worn thin by constant summoning of Nurgle's minions. If a campaign against the Death Guard drags on, time is always on the side of decay. By the final days, nothing untainted remains, and the sons of Mortarion stand immune at the center of the devastation, surrounded by flies and corpses. And speaking of Mortarion, Mortarion is the Primarch of the Death Guard, and one of Nurgle's most exalted demon princes. Once a fierce warlord who fought to free Barbarous from demonic tyrants, he now exemplifies hypocritical damnation. He became the very tyrant of decay he once despised. As a demon Primarch, Mortarion appears as a towering, winged figure of death, gaunt and cadaverous, clad in corroded Baroque armor, and draped in a tattered cloak of sickly green. He carries the massive scythe Silence, a blade taller than a man, which can sever souls as easily as flesh, and a heavy lantern-like weapon called the Lantern, that fires concentrated warp plague energy. Mortarion's presence is heralded by a poisonous fog, an extension of the terrible atmosphere of Barbarous, and the drone of innumerable corpse flies. In temperament, the Death Lord is somber, bitter, and utterly devoted to Nurgle's creed of entropy. He hates the Emperor and the Imperium with a seething passion, nursing ancient grudges from the Horus heresy, such as his resentment that the Emperor denied him the chance to slay his adoptive father on Barbarous. Mortarion also bears special enmity toward his ultramarine brother, Robuti Gilliman, whose realm he nearly corrupted during the Plague Wars. Now ruling from the Plague Planet in the Eye of Terror, Mortarion directs the overall strategy of the Death Guard. He is somewhat isolationist, preferring to cultivate his own diseased domain, but will emerge personally for the most significant campaigns, such as the one where the Death Guard invaded the realm of Ultramar, and where the demonic Primarch of the 14th Legion faced his loyalist brother in a mortal duel. Once First Captain Callus Typhon of the Death Guard, now Typhus, his Mortarion's chief lieutenant turned rival. It was Typhon's treachery that damned the Legion at the onset of the heresy, and he was the first to embrace Nurgle's gifts on the Terminus Est. In reward, Typhus became host to the Destroyer Hive, a colony of virulent demonic flies that resides in his armored carcass. These insects can erupt forth in swarms, devouring and infecting all around him. Typhus literally carries plagues and corruption wherever he treads. Clad in ancient cataphracti Terminator armor, bloated to Ogren-like proportions, Typhus is a fearsome sight. He wields Master Claw, a giant man-reaper's scythe, similar to Mortarion's, and as a potent psyker to boot. Typhus actively uses his warp magic to spread disease. As Nurgle's herald, he often acts independently, cruising the stars aboard the Plague flagship Terminus Est. Typhus leads the first Plague Company, the Harbingers, and has the title Lord of the Death Guard's Plague Fleet, commanding great respect and fear among Nurgle's followers. His independence has caused friction with Mortarion. Indeed, some say Typhus sees himself as the true chosen of Nurgle, unshackled by Mortarion's brooding grudges. Typhus's personality is cruel, ambitious, and utterly remorseless. He has been responsible for some of the most devastating plague outbreaks in Imperial history, such as the Curse of Unbelief zombie plagues. For example, he personally led the contagion that consumed Forge World Metallica, turning billions of machine-adoring humans into droning plague thralls. Typhus is often called the Traveler because he ranges widely, while Mortarion fortifies the Scourge stars. Typhus ensures that no corner of the galaxy is safe from Nurgle's touch. Imperial scholars consider him one of the single most dangerous Chaos Lords at large, as unpredictable as he is seemingly unkillable. It is darkly ironic that Typhus still nominally holds the title of Captain of the Terminal Est and the First Plague Company, titles from an earlier age when he swore loyalty to Mortarion. In truth, Typhus's only loyalty now is to Grandfather Nurgle and the fulfillment of the Plague God's pestilential schemes. The Death Guard's battlefield potency does not rest on rank-and-file Plague Marines alone, but on a cadre of sinister specialists who amplify disease, despair, and strategic attrition beyond mortal comprehension. From the scalpel work of plague surgeons to the grim accounting of the tallyman, each serves a distinct purpose in Mortarion's grand design, ensuring that every engagement slides inexorably toward rot. Noxious Blightbringers are known as heralds of pestilence, striding before the main Death Guard advance while tolling massive plague bells affixed to their rusted power armor. Each peal of the cursed bell sends out waves of entropy that disorient and debilitate the foe. The tolling resonates, not just in the ears, but in the soul, eroding morale and sapping the enemy's will to fight. In close quarters, these bells are especially tormenting to psychers. The unnatural resonance disrupts their warp craft and corrodes their sanity. Within the Legion, a Blightbringer's incessant bell is the omen of a coming assault, a sound that announces Nurgle's presence. Many plague companies will not march to war without these pallid, bell-bearing demagogues at the fore, clamoring a funeral knell that presages the foe's collapse. The sorcerers of the Death Guard, commonly called malignant plague casters, are warp-tainted psychers who wield Nurgle's foul energies as a weapon. In battle, they conjure forth demonic plagues and entropic curses with pestilential effect. Whole ranks of enemies can be seen bloating and blackening as these warlocks vomit gouts of empiric filth and decay into the air. These abilities make them terrifying force multipliers, yet ironically they are met with distrust within their own ranks. Mortarion, the Legion's demon Primarch, harbors an open loathing for witchcraft that survived even his ascension, and he regards his own Psyker sons with thinly veiled contempt. Thus, Death Guard sorcerers often exist as pariahs amongst their brothers, tolerated for their utility and effectiveness, but never truly trusted. Those Death Guard champions who earn Nurgle's ultimate favor ascend to become demon princes, former Astartes who have bargained away their last shreds of their mortality for unholy power and eternal life. A Death Guard demon prince is a corpulent, nightmarish giant, often with sprouted horned visages, cankerous hide, and plague-ridden pinions. Yet it retains the cunning and martial might it possessed as a mortal warlord. They act as warlords of their own, leading entire plague hosts, or ruling over demon worlds granted to them in the Eye of Terror. To the traitor Legion, these beings are living idols of Nurgle's reward, revered and obeyed as sainted fathers of decay. On the battlefield, they are practically unkillable terrors. Even if banished in war, a demon prince of Nurgle will eventually reform in the Immaterium, ready to plague the material universe anew, so long as Grandfather Nurgle wills it. Biologus Putrefiers serve as the Death Guard's grotesque battlefield biologists. Deranged scientists obsessed with perfecting the art of plaguecraft. They carry racks of improvised toxins and bear a unique mutation. Clusters of cyst-like, lidless eyes embedded beneath their flesh, allowing them to perceive the progress of infection inside a victim's body in exquisite detail. On the front lines, a putrefier moves among the dying with frenzied purpose, using injector pistols to inoculate victims with experimental poxes, and then siphoning the resultant pus and other substances for later study. Every agonizing demise is a data point. They tally how each strain spreads and mutates, recording their findings in journals to refine Nurgle's plagues to new extremes. Enemies quickly learn that killing a Biologus Putrefier can be as dangerous as letting them live. A well-placed shot may rupture the foul, fluid-filled grenades festooning his armor, releasing an instant cascade of concentrated disease around his body. In the eyes of the Death Guard Legion, these fanatical empiricists are treasured for pushing the boundaries of Nurgle's blessings, no matter the obscene means required. The tallymen of the Death Guard are part priest, part demagogue, and part quartermaster, the spiritual accountants of the Legion's wars. They wade into battle reciting endless litanies over blaring vox speakers. Their voices are like a droning chant that revolves around the sacred number 7. Every aspect of warfare is enumerated in these crackling invocations. The number of shells fired, limbs damaged, screams heard, even the flies buzzing in the plague-choked air are all dutifully counted in 7s. As the tallyman counts each grotesque offering, the Death Guard around him fight with renewed fervor, buoyed by the palpable presence of their patron's favor. Outside of battle, the tallyman remains secretive and apart, for theirs is an order entrusted with terrible responsibility. Mortarion himself granted them the cipher keys to the Death Guard's most forbidden vaults on the Plague Planet, where the Legion's deadliest bespoke contagions are stored. Plague surgeons are the 14th Legion's depraved version of an apothecary. Battlefield DECAY twisted by Nurgle's rot. These hooded figures forego conventional healing as the Death Guard's unnatural resilience rarely needs it, and instead devote themselves to cultivating the myriad of infections that fester in their brethren. Acting as custodians of contagion, they use tainted chirurgical tools to bolster the gifts of Nurgle within each Plague Marine, strengthening the warp-borne diseases that empower the Death Guard, even as those same plagues ravage the enemy. Plague surgeons practice gene harvesting on the fallen. They crack open dying Astartes, loyalist and traitor alike, to extract gene seed, ensuring the Legion's blighted growth. Reviled by the Imperium for such atrocities, within the Death Guard, these foul chirurgeons are valued as vital caretakers of Grandfather Nurgle's blessings and the longevity of the Legion's warband. The Death Guard's plague fleets are not mere battle groups, but drifting pandemics rendered in iron and flesh. No Death Guard warhost travels alone. Rotten escort frigates, seized Imperial merchantmen, and hulking space hulks, accreted to the fleet's flanks, form a slow but inexorable space armada. Each hull is thick with corrosion and fly-choked ruptures, yet their Geller fields persist in a state of malignant half-function, allowing warp fauna to nest within without tearing the vessels apart. Where other traitor legions crave plunder or glory, the Death Guard view the void merely as the conduit for Grandfather's bounty. Worlds are not conquered through decisive fleet actions, but suffocated over months of quarantine failures, port blockades, and unchecked plague. Void warfare, as waged by the 14th Legion, has nothing of speed or graceful maneuvers about it. Their plague fleets advance with the implacable certainty of a spreading rot. Engagements open with pathogenic bombardment, Virulent torpedoes and chem warheads stud target hulls in a lattice of corrosion, releasing dense spore clouds that infest every deck they find. Once the shields gutter out, Blightlord Terminators spearhead brutal boarding actions. Their teleport strikes punch home amid the choking fog, while seething ranks of Poxwalkers surge with them as expendable, infectious bulwarks. Should a vessel still cling to life, vectors from the Armada deliberately rupture its environmental systems, subverting air recyclers and water reserves into incubation vats for Nurgle's gifts, until the ship itself becomes little more than a derelict, pestilence-ridden shrine to decay. The flagship of Typhus the Traveler, the Terminus Est, was once a proud Gloriana-class vessel of the 14th Legion. Millennia of warp taint have transformed its adamantium bones into a cankered leviathan. Gun decks are shrouded in spore fog, launch bays crawl with plague drones, and its ancient drives bleed rust smoke as readily as plasma. Every corridor thrums with the droning hymns of those who worship the Plague Father, for the ship is both cathedral and weapon, an engine whose sole purpose is to seed entire star systems with contagion. The Terminus Est is a big ship, and it takes its occupants a long time to travel within it. The warship's ventral hatches yawn wide when it is above a target, disgorging a tar-black torrent. Thick, foaming sludge brewed from every vile remnant of its chem-saturated innards. Liquefied never-born bone, apothecarian waste, bioweapon refuse, and half-congealed runoff from overcrowded experiment bays, all swirled together in that nauseating slurry. For decades, the brew has festered inside Geller-shrouded vats, fermenting beneath heat lamps until chains of armor-devouring compounds fuse with colonies of flesh-melting bacteria, each globule shot through with warp taint. Spewing out like vomit into the void, the mass refuses to crystallize or scatter. Instead, it surges harder, pouring in unbroken torrents that hunt anything solid. When the deluge smashes home, tons of bubbling corruption hammer the hull, eating through metal and flesh alike in a hideous, hissing cascade. When the Death Guard Legion goes to war and is readying themselves for landing on a planet, units of Plague Marines hunker in rust-lit alcoves, methodically scraping corrosion from bolter casings and adjusting the pustular growths that fuse armor to flesh. No practice cages clang, no ritual duels echo, for the sons of Mortarion ready themselves in solitary communion with their own decay. Before each descent, they catalog anew blessings grown since the last campaign. An extra gland that dribbles toxin, a visor film thickened, and murmur with the scampering little lords and ambling plague-bearers, divining hints of fate in their giggling forecasts. The holds remain subdued. Only the groan of corroded beams, the damp throb of plague-swollen engines, and the occasional splash of ichor breaking the hush. Expectation is replaced by dutiful resignation, a quiet diligence bred from endless sieges, and the certainty that rot will definitely triumph, even if in some occasions it takes longer to settle in. There is said to be little anger in this legion, despite it being set within a universe where the cause for it is so plentiful. Instead, they cultivate patient resolve, tending their living maladies until the drop alarms rasp, and the Plague Marines and other monstrosities get into landing craft as silent gardeners, poised to sow another world with the slow bloom of oblivion.
Praise be to the Plague Lord!
To the unfaithful I bring holy plagues ripe with enlightenment. To the devout, the blessing of immortality through the kiss of sacred rot. And to you flesh-crafted puppets of our failing Imperium, I bring the holiest gift of all, silence.
In conclusion, the Death Guard Legion stands unrepentant and resolute in the 41st millennium. They have weathered every calamity and only become more virulent. Under Mortarion's grim leadership and Typhus's malignant enthusiasm, they pursue a warfare of slow annihilation that the Imperium is ill-suited to counter in an era of constant crisis, where they have to spread themselves thin to defend many fronts. Even as the Imperium burns and new heroes arise, the Death Guard remain an ever-present blight. In their view, all of creation will eventually rot. And so, in the bitter twilight of the 41st millennium, Mortarion's Legion marches on, through shattered warp gates and plague storms, carrying the plague chalice of Nurgle to the farthest stars. Their current status is one of malign ascendance, a dark mirror of the Emperor's angels, spreading not the Emperor's light, but a pandemic of misery. As long as life exists, the Death Guard will labor to destroy and defile it, for in DECAY they see truth and destiny. In this, they will not stop until either the galaxy is drowned in filth, or they are utterly wiped out. And the latter grows less likely with each passing plague-ridden day. In our next video, we will explore the Ultramar conflict, a devastating war that cost millions of casualties and even brought Mortarion himself and the Primarch of the Ultramarines Legion into direct confrontation. We will look into the corruption that Typhus brought to the Charadon sector in his bid to taint a very valuable planet of the Imperium. The Death Guard's involvement in Abaddon's Black Crusades, and other active war zones. Prepare to learn about the devastation and misery that the Death Guard has brought to each system and subsector they have invaded.
Hello brothers, I hope you enjoyed this lore overview of the Death Guard, which happens to be one of my all-time favorite legions. For this one, I wanted to do something a little bit different than before, and as you may have noticed through some sections of the video, I included some custom animations made in Unreal Engine to give this episode a little bit of a different flavor. For some time now, I have been learning the engine to create animations that I hope will enhance the visual aspect of the episodes and will bring a fresh flavor to our lore overviews. If you enjoyed this video and you think this kind of presentation works well, let me know in the comments so I can keep working to bring more of these videos to life. So, to make this one possible, I digitalized my entire Death Guard miniature collection, along with terrain, props and other assets, as well as some models from other armies I have, such as the Ultramarines that you saw in the video. Many of these models have been on my shelf since I first entered the hobby, so I thought that by bringing them to the digital world, I will put them to good use. The process was long but enjoyable, and I will say that definitely worth it. Learning Unreal Engine has been an eye-opening experience to me since I first delved into it in January of this year. Once I understood what kind of scenes I could make, the creative process became like 7 times more fun, and I could imagine a scene and then recreate it in the engine to bring my vision to life. And the work has been fun, but also challenging. Being able to create any scene imaginable is indeed fascinating, but it comes at the cost of having to actually learn how to do just that. So with hours upon hours of courses, online tutorials, and lots of trial and error, I managed to get a basic understanding of lighting, fog, visual effects, props, decals, and many other aspects that make for a believable scene, especially when trying to recreate the grim darkness and devastated landscapes of the 41st millennium. So my plan for the next couple of months is to keep learning Unreal Engine, as I know it will help me elevate the visual aspect of the videos I present to you guys, while also giving me more tools for my arsenal, not only for these Warhammer videos, but also for my own future projects. Moving on, I want to thank Scrobosaurus, Adam, and Son of Sonnet, who were the voice actors for this episode. Working with them is always a fantastic experience, and they really help to bring the videos to life with their voices and their enthusiasm. Also Charlie and GB, who helped me in the video editing process, as well as James, who was the one that gave me a hand when it was about taking the Warhammer models from the real world and taking them to the digital one. Now, this behind the scenes section is just a very short summary of how we managed to put this video together, but if you want me to go deeper into the technical aspect of how we managed to digitalize the models or achieve certain effects in Unreal Engine or DaVinci Resolve, which is the one I use for video editing, let me know so I can go deeper into this topic in another video. If you have any suggestions, ideas, questions, or any constructive feedback, feel free to let me know in the comments. And finally, if you want to support the channel and the content we're making here, make sure to check out our Patreon page or become a YouTube channel member to get some perks like early access to our videos, behind the scenes stuff, access to our Discord server, and more. In the name of the team behind this channel, we thank you for watching and we hope to see you on the next one. Cheers.